It's done, and at 15 milliseconds, people, here it comes, at 15 milliseconds, we're going to get, at 15 milliseconds, what function is going to be called back, Alexa, into JavaScript?
Data to view. Data
to view, beautiful. And talk me through, if you don't mind, Alexa, the process of that. So data to view is going to go where?
In the callback queue.
Uh-huh.
And then the event loop is going to check if our global code is done running, which it is.
Perfect.
And if the call stack is empty, which it is. And then it will pop the data to view function off of the callback queue and push it onto the call stack.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Yeah, there it is. Onto the call stack. And, our pens are starting to struggle a bit here. Onto the call stack. And that is where it's going to create, Alexa, what?
A new execution context.
Exactly, a new execution context, which is going to do the job of displaying. How's this going to do? Going to do the job of displaying. Oh, we don't need that much. It's a nice, clean, simple function. It's going to do the job of displaying our data for the user. Are we familiar with this now? Are we bored with this? Is this tedious? You bet it is. Oh, no, it's a big function. Okay, I got that wrong. You should have stopped me. There we go. There's a big old function here because we're now doing anything that the user can see is going to be produced inside this function. And only produced if the user is going to see it in that moment. Through this mental model, this paradigmatic shift to anything user sees that they could not see or choose to change must be dependent on underlying data from a source of truth, from a cause, a single cause, which is JavaScript data. In this case, simple piece of data, post. And everything inside that data to view is basing itself off post. Even where it's not, in line 4, implicitly it's saying produce input under any value of post. But we know it's all coming through this one function based off our data in JavaScript. Which is kind of cool, by the way, because it means we could potentially describe in full as an intermediate step before we actually add those elements to the page, we could describe them in full in JavaScript first. And maybe end up with a visual representation of our DOM in JavaScript first. Which would be kind of cool, kind of neat. Okay, I think neat's a word anyone's used in. Alright, let's do that. Let's start running data to view. And a bit more complex than we've done before. Well, not really, but Alexa, let's go through what the JS input assignment here is doing.
Yes, so we're going to reassign JS input to the evaluated result of invoking our create element method on the document object.
Perfect. Create element with what argument?
The string input.
Input. Perfect. Input. There it is. And this is going to do, can you talk me through the stages inside of create element here?
Yes, so first we're going to use the document object's hidden link to find the DOM.
Beautiful. Link to the DOM.
And then we're going to create an element that is the type input.
Yes, perfect. We'll put it right here. It's not yet on our appended list of elements. It's not yet appended to the body because JavaScript doesn't really do anything, doesn't know where we wanted to put that element. I'll give it credit. It doesn't know where we want to put that element. HTML, we have a structure. It's going to appear in listed order down the page, not in JavaScript. We don't know where. Oh, and if it wants to be a child element or a sub-element or a nested element in HTML, we put it inside of the element we want it to be appended as a nested element to. So lovely. Does that happen in JavaScript? You bet it does not. So, yeah. It would be nice if we could get some emulation of that. Wouldn't it be cool if we could get some emulation of that in our JavaScript code? Maybe a visual representation in JavaScript of the structure of our page. But that we couldn't do that. That sounds too much like a win. That sounds too... Yeah, okay, all right. Good. So, yeah, we create input unattached right now. And we want to be able to edit it, though, later, Alexa, right? So what do we... Help me out here. What do we get?
Also going to get a JavaScript object with a hidden link to that new input node on the DOM.
Right, and also a bunch of functions that are useful for editing, updating, adding handlers to the input node. Perfect. Like on input, like value. So that object is then going to be stored in what global, again, for the purposes of easy diagramming, what global global variable.
JS input.
Perfect. There it is. So let's draw it in full there. It has, just remind me of the methods available on it here.
Value
Yep.
on input.
I think that's it because we're doing a simplified version here. No. These blues are very challenging. There it is. And it has a link, as we said, to a newly created but not yet displayed input element on the DOM, input object. Note, people, here, we are now not seeing it immediately over here. We're creating it from scratch. We've ended up with exactly the same thing as we would have by querying our HTML created version of this input element. Nothing's different, but we've now created it from within JavaScript, which means the only difference is it's now not already attached and therefore not already showing up on the page. To be fair, we don't know where we want it to be attached. We're going to require, well, with JavaScript, we're going to require imperatively describing rather than declaratively by showing where it is on the HTML file, describing its output, where it's located on the page. Instead, we're going to have to imperatively in JavaScript attach it and describe where, or capture specifically where we want to attach it. If only we could do better. Hopefully we will. Okay, what's going to be by now? Talk me through what happens in line 5, Alexa.
So we're going to be reassigning the value of JSDiv,
Mm-hmm.
but first we have our
Ternary, right, exactly.
evaluate.
Yes, so we check the first bit before the question mark, and if it's true, then we assign the second bit, and if it's false, we assign the result of the last part of the ternary. So, is the first bit true?
No.
Post is an empty string, it is not will. So we jump to creating.
We're going to create a new element again.
Brilliant.
But this time it's going to be a div.
Give me a div. Let's do it. That's created on the DOM directly. And we now, I'm just going to do it by analogy, the output of calling it. Output evaluating. What's the output of evaluating the document.create element past the argument of div? What is going to be assigned to the global variable JSDiv, Alexa?
A JavaScript object with a hidden link.
Beautiful.
To that new unattached div node.
Beautiful.
With all of the properties and getter setters that go with a div type.
Beautiful. There it is, including text content. And note, no need for remove here, because we're not going to create this element unless the conditional evaluates to false and post is not will. If it is will, and we could have done it the other way around, to be honest, couldn't we? Like, post is not will, we have create element, but whatever. And at that point, we would then create instead an empty string and end up appending nothing, no div element to the page. We've switched our mindset. We've switched our mindset from based on assuming that we are going to always have a div and an input from HTML, we then have to remove it based on the data in JavaScript to only creating elements, only determining what the user sees based on specified, explicitly defined data in JavaScript. That is our source of truth. You want to do it, Mark?
When replace children executes every 15 milliseconds, would the new input element lose focus? Would the user need
Great question. Absolutely, and that is a line of code that I don't include here, but to even experiment with this, you have to do so. We'll come to it in a second.
It is in the challenges.
It's in the challenges, exactly. So, great. So we will be going to challenges. The really lovely set of challenges built by Alexa and co. Of these, actually, let's shout them out. Specifically, Amelia and Jonathan and Alexa built out an amazing set of challenges that we can push ourselves on all this content and extend beyond. We're going to build out a visual virtual DOM, but we're not going to implement multi-level nodes within it. We will within the challenges. To actually do this in practice, there's only one line we need to change, which we're going to see is if we're recreating our input element on the DOM every single time the user, every 50 milliseconds, it's a brand new element. We default to not being focused. Focus means the cursor of the user is in that input field when it is added to the page, when the page loads, when it's displayed. We default to it not being focused. We will need to call the focus method which would be something here like JS input dot focus and then executed, that will insert the user's cursor in that brand new every 15 millisecond created input field. We're going to need to optimize for this design. Do not worry. However, I don't put it on here because so I can have our great friend online remind us. Now, I don't put it on here because in hard parts, I was saying this to Paul a second ago, and there's going to be a few things like this where if it doesn't break, I mean, in this case, actually it would break, it wouldn't work. We'd be sort of trying to click inside the cell, inside the input field, and it would just be bouncing us out every 15 milliseconds. But other than that one, if it doesn't break, like to some extent, my job in hard parts is to remove anything that is extraneous, there you go, extraneous, remove anything that is extraneous in order to only keep the pieces that give us the ability to build out the mental model. But like the diagramming is tedious. It means you're never going to forget this mental model, flip an egg, and it's the only mental model. However, it is demanding. And so every chance I can to remove a conditional, remove a line, albeit the focus line is really important. So shout out to our person reminding us. If I had forgotten to say that, that would have been bad. But the focus line is the one where this wouldn't function without it. We're going to see a few other things like that, where technically we're going to apply a call to text content getter or setter on, we're going to see later on, an element that doesn't have a meaningful text content getter setter. But we'll do it anyway in order to not write the conditional to say, if there is not a meaningful use of text content in this case, do not call it, because that's an extra line of code that for diagramming, as long as it doesn't literally break, which with the exception of this focus one, it won't, then for diagramming purposes, minimize code. But know that there'll be a few places like that where it'll be like, this works, the user's experience, it is correct, but would you actually do that? Or would you not? You wouldn't change the code you wrote, besides add conditionals, we'll see, saying, don't try and call that getter setter property on that element because it doesn't have that getter setter property. JavaScript wrote an error on it, so we're fine, but we do it for the purposes of, minimizing complexity on already diagrams that, yes. Anyway, alright, so where were we? We were about to add our content. So now we're back to normal. But the only difference is we created elements as opposed to use the implication that they were always on from HTML. HTML is switch them on, they're always there. True by default. We need to recognize they're not true by default. They are visual things the user can change. They are content. Therefore, give them associated data. Post is our associated data for them. I know it's not like, it doesn't look like we're saying JSDiv appears true or false, but we are having JSDiv's appearance where it does depend on post, if the user writes will, determined by data at any given time. It will never display except in response to, except caused by underlying data tracked in Java. Have I said that enough times now? I mean, again, it's like on repeat is the... Alright, so let's go to line 8. Alexa, if you don't mind keeping us going here, and we'll keep this fairly simple now, keep this fairly short, this bit.
Yes, we're going to use the value setter property on our JS input object to find the linked input node on the DOM and set the value to the value of our post variable, which is an empty string.
Great, and we'll do the same for...
the text content on the div.
Yep, text is going to be an empty string, and then our value is also an empty string. So JS div text content. What's our next line saying to do, Alexa?
Then we're going to set the onInput callback function on our input to our handle input function.
On input, if you can verbalize that as much as possible, I don't even know what it would be. Just so that as I write this, there is some lovely background noise. I'll do it. Input is going to have as you said, the callback handle input function as a handler. Input handler was what Alexa rightly said. Input handler will be set to be a reference to that handle input. Brilliant. There it is. I mean, I've called anyone's fantastic technical communication anything but exceptional background noise. I apologize for my anything but endorsement of the wonderful technical communication, everyone. And then in line 12, now, Alexa, what is happening here? We're going to... sorry, go ahead, please.
Now we are going to find our document object in our JavaScript memory.
Right.
And then find the body property / getter setter
Right.
on that object, and then invoke the replace children method there. And we're going to pass in JS input and JS div.
These two, exactly, JS input and JS div. JS input and JS div. And the way these are working is the body has a link to the body element on the DOM. JS input, it has a link to the body element on the DOM. JS div has a link to the body element on the DOM. Has a link to the body element on the DOM. There it is. And so, replace children. Well, right now, body doesn't have any. You can see the end of the object is there. It doesn't have any. Nothing's on the page inside a body. We're going to replace its children, strange old phrasing in the good old DOM API, with JS input linked input DOM element in C++, JS divs linked div element in the C++ list, and we're going to set them as the children. I'm just going to show the little arrows there, which means, Alexa, what's going to show up on our actual web page?
Our input and our div.
Beautiful. Fantastic. And there it is, automatically because of our layout and render engines. Amazing. We have displayed everything through one function, no mysteries, and all conditional on our underlying state